Parenting is one of the best management training programs there is. Having a child is like getting a tattoo on your face. So you better be committed. Parenting is much more than just babysitting a child. In parenting, we go from taking care of a small child who completely requires us to make every decision for them to an adult who is completely independent of us. The aim of good parenting is not to raise a child to become a good child. The aim of good parenting is to raise a child to become a good adult. For any child of any age, motivation has been and will always be simply getting satisfaction from an activity. If a child does not get any satisfaction from that activity, that child will not be motivated to do it. Note that an obligation to do a task is something completely different. Obligation is not motivation. By definition, obligations are constraints that can put a limit to freedom. So using only obligation or bribing, money rewards, toys to persuade a child to do something will most certainly backfire in the long run. The first problem with motivation is that we cannot create motivation in someone else. Motivation is not what one person does to another person. The science of psychology tells us clearly that motivation is something that people must do for themselves. And our job as motivators is to help the other person develop themselves. Their very own reasons for doing that something. The good news is that every child is already motivated by something. Whether that motivation is good or bad is another story. For example, a child that does nothing is a child that is highly motivated to do nothing. A child that avoids any activities or responsibilities is a child that made a connection between that activity and some stress or anxiety. So, will be trying very hard to avoid that activity. For example, if a child connects going to school with stress or anxiety, that child will be motivated to do everything possible to stay away from school. Also explains why going to the dentist can be a challenge for young children because they already associated the dentist with pain and anxiety. Therefore, the very first thing you want to do as a motivator is to understand what motivates the other person and to understand the reason for any negative behavior. However, to do this, some of us parents will face the next problem. The problem is that to really understand or get a child to speak to us openly, we will need to have established an existing communication channel with them. This is where all our investments as parents should start to pay off when we already started as early as possible to build this positive communication channel. If we cannot talk normally and discuss peacefully with our children without raising our voices, we have lost control and a very big opportunity. Positive communication with a child helps them develop in a healthy way and strengthens our bond with them. When we communicate with children, we are also helping them build their own communication and language skills. The only thing that should change with communication as the child grows is the vocabulary and the depth of the discussion. Certainly, as time goes on, the child will get better at arguments with us to get what they want. However, we must resist the urge to raise our voice to kill a discussion. Instead, we should improve our arguments. If we have no time to talk now, let the child know when the discussion can continue. We should never forget that parenting is a two-way relationship and we learn from and for each other. If we want to get the child's attention, we will need to take the time, sit down and look comfortable even when we are not. One of the world leaders in child development and learning, Dr. Alison Gopnik, in her book The Gardener and the Carpenter, claimed that the whole purpose of childhood is to have and enjoy a space for diversity and novelty. Dr. Alison Gopnik compared parenting to gardening, where the gardener does everything by the book, but nothing comes out the way the gardener expects. Some things will be worse than expected and some things will be better than expected. The reason being that the main task of the gardener is to create an ecosystem of rich soil and protected space so that many different things can flourish, which if translated into parenting would sound like this: that the main task of a parent is to create that ecosystem that allows the child to have and enjoy a space for diversity and novelty. And the longer we can allow the child to discover and try out things for themselves, the more resilient or tough that child will become in the face of challenges. So, what has all of what we said so far told us about being parents who want to motivate our children to do what we think is best for them? There are at least 6 things. First, this is telling us that parenting techniques do not matter at all. What is really important is that there is a parent who is providing that opportunity for diversity and novelty. That we as parents need to be a little less obsessed with grades and scores and become interested in providing the foundation for this wonderful ecosystem. Our jobs as parents is not to make our children become what we would like them to become, but to support them in becoming their best selves and getting enough sleep in the process. Our jobs as parents is to give the child the chance to try things out for themselves, to fall down, to stand up, to learn sometimes by themselves and for themselves. That we as parents should never try to force our children to live the life we wanted for ourselves. We must begin to love to say yes to good ideas that the child will have. And when we notice a talent, it is our duty to explore that talent. That we as parents must unconditionally love our children for who they are, not for what we would like them to be. We are ourselves imperfect people, but we want to raise perfect children. Our children are learning more from what we are than what we say or teach. Our children are learning from watching and participating in everyday things that they see from school, from us, from television, from the internet, and so on. If there is less of us around because we did not have time to practice parenting, our children will simply fill the gaps from the internet or the streets. And, by the way, children are great imitators. And as a parent, we are responsible for ensuring they have something good to imitate, including practicing what we teach. For example, if we are motivating a child to exercise, we better be exercising too. When it comes down to practical motivation for small tasks like cleaning the room or taking care of the dishes, we as parents need to understand that we will never be able to control the true attitude and true cooperation of our children towards any task or activity. And it is wise not to waste time on what we cannot control. What we can control, however, is how we describe the task or activity to the child. There are 2 things to consider when trying to motivate a child to undertake a small or even a big task. First, the child must understand that there is an end to the task. No one is motivated to take a task or chore that they do not know when it will end. Example, instead of saying to a child, "Go practice the piano," say instead, "Go practice the piano for 30 minutes. If they continue after that, it is their choice, which you can decide to reward them for or not. The second information to add to a task description with a potential to make the task more interesting is to mention how this task fits into a bigger picture. For example, instead of saying, "Go brush your teeth," you could say instead, "Go brush your teeth, otherwise they will all fall out and you will not be able to eat cookies anymore." For those tasks where a parent really needs to motivate from absolute zero because either the task is already hated by the child or just too big or complex, we will need to be very specific about what we want them to do exactly. Example, instead of saying, clean your room, we will need to be more specific. For example, could you please put all the toys back on the shelf? Another example, instead of saying, prepare the dining table, you could be more specific, like, please help me put the glasses on the table, and then get the lemonade from the fridge. Our role as parent is both as coach and cheerleader. Therefore, when the child is doing a task, especially the first time, we as parents have to be around to coach and to cheer. The easiest way to do this is to go with them and start the task together. Sharing the activity with the child provides the parent an opportunity to show the child that their contribution is extremely valued. Very important to remember here is that depending on the age of the child, they will very likely never be able to complete the task 100% to your satisfaction. However, except there is a safety or health risk, we must refrain from criticizing the imperfections and immediately redoing the task, because if a child sees us redoing what they did, we just killed their motivation. This is one reason why, if you are a perfectionist, parenting will be very challenging for you. Concluding, just imagine trying to motivate a child who feels that our love or attention for them depends on the grades or marks they bring home, or a child who has no time for himself or herself because we micromanage all their time and all their activities. When we as parents are close to our children, doing things together, providing our support and advices when needed, we will be in a position to know what exactly motivates them. Once we know what motivates our children, we can use this wisely to motivate them to accept more responsibilities in their lives. Certainly, we cannot, and actually we do not want to be there forever as coach and cheerleader. However, if we get it right, that child will understand for himself or herself why he or she needs to become a good citizen and what he or she will need to do to succeed. If we buy a child a toy, that child will play with it for a week and forget about it. But that child will never forget all the wonderful positive experiences they shared with us. This is why the best thing you can invest in a child is your time. Whatever you decide to do, may it make you happy.